What happens when Hollywood's biggest action star sits down with television's most ruthless host, and everything goes completely off the rails? Tonight, we're diving into the explosive confrontation that had security rushing onto set, cameras stopped rolling, and one of the most powerful men in entertainment being escorted out of the building. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because this story will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about live television. The green room at Real Time was unusually quiet that evening. Tom Cruise sat in his tailored Navy suit, reviewing his talking points about his latest film while sipping bottled water. He had done countless interviews over his decades-long career, but something felt different about tonight. The production assistants seemed nervous, whispering among themselves and avoiding eye contact. When the showrunner approached him 20 minutes before airtime, her expression was tense. "Mr. Cruise, I just want to give you a heads up," she said quietly. "Bill's been in a mood today. He's been asking the writers to dig up some old material about you. I thought you should know." Tom's jaw tightened slightly, but his media-trained smile never wavered. "What kind of material?" "Personal stuff. Family stuff. The kind of things that usually stay off limits." She looked around nervously. "I tried to talk him out of it, but you know how he gets when he smells blood in the water." The actor's blue eyes hardened. He had agreed to this interview as a favor to the network, promoting his upcoming film while also supporting the show's ratings. But if Maher wanted to play dirty, Tom was more than ready for that game. "Tell Mr. Maher I'll be ready for whatever he wants to throw at me," Tom said, his voice carrying that familiar intensity that had made him one of Hollywood's most bankable stars. The production assistant nodded and hurried away, leaving Tom alone with his thoughts. He had weathered countless media storms throughout his career, from his controversial statements about psychiatry to his high-profile relationships and divorces. But something about tonight felt different, more personal, more calculated. 20 minutes later, he walked onto the familiar set of Real Time, the studio audience applauding as he made his way to the guest chair. Bill Maher stood behind his desk, grinning that sardonic smile that had become his trademark. The cameras rolled, and the show began with its usual opening monologue. But Tom could sense the tension building like electricity in the air. "Tonight's guest is someone who needs no introduction," Maher began, turning to face his guest. "He's jumped off buildings, hung from helicopters, and somehow convinced audiences to believe he's a secret agent despite being shorter than most of his leading ladies. Please welcome Tom Cruise." The audience laughed and applauded, but Tom noticed the slight edge in Maher's voice, the way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "This was going to be interesting. Thanks for having me, Bill," Tom replied, settling into his chair with practiced ease. "Always a pleasure to be here." "Oh, the pleasure is all mine," Maher said, his tone dripping with false sincerity. "Especially since I get to ask you all the questions everyone else is too polite to ask." Tom's smile remained fixed, but his posture shifted slightly, a subtle indication to anyone who knew him well that he was preparing for battle. "I'm an open book, Bill. Ask away." "An open book," Maher repeated, savoring the words. "That's interesting, because most open books don't have quite so many chapters locked away in vaults, if you know what I mean." The audience grew quiet, sensing the shift in tone. Tom's publicist, watching from the wings, felt her stomach drop. This wasn't going to be the friendly promotional interview they had arranged. "I'm not sure what you're getting at," Tom said, his voice steady but with an unmistakable warning underneath. "Oh, I think you do," Maher replied, leaning forward with predatory interest. "See, here's the thing about Hollywood. Everyone pretends everything is perfect, everyone's happy, everyone's living their best life. But behind all that carefully crafted image, there are real people with real problems. And some of those problems are a lot more interesting than whatever movie you're here to promote." Tom's hands remained relaxed on the armrests of his chair, but his knuckles had gone white. "I'm here to talk about my film, Bill. That's what we agreed on." "Did we, though?" Maher asked, tilting his head with mock confusion. "Because I don't remember agreeing to anything. I remember my producers telling me you wanted to come on the show, and me thinking, well, this should be fun." Tom Cruise, the man who spent 40 years perfecting the art of saying nothing while talking for hours. The audience was dead silent now, the energy in the room thick with anticipation. Tom's media training kicked in, and he forced his trademark smile back onto his face. "I think you might have me confused with someone else, Bill. I've always been Pretty straightforward about who I am and what I believe in. Have you, though? Maher pressed. Because I've got to tell you, from where I'm sitting, you're about as straightforward as a maze. All those carefully worded statements, all those perfectly timed smiles, all those interviews where you somehow managed to talk for 20 minutes without actually saying anything at all. Tom's smile faltered for just a moment, but it was enough for Maher to notice. The host's eyes lit up like a shark sensing blood in the water. There it is, Maher said, pointing at Tom with theatrical flair. That little crack in the perfect facade. That's what I've been waiting for. I don't know what game you think you're playing here, Bill, Tom said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that had silenced countless directors and producers over the years. But I suggest you be very careful about what you say next. The studio audience was completely silent now, watching the two men face off like gladiators in an arena. Camera operators zoomed in, capturing every micro-expression, every subtle shift in body language. This was television gold, and everyone in the room knew it. Game? Maher laughed, but there was no humor in it. This isn't a game, Tom. This is reality. Something you might not be too familiar with, given how much time you spend playing pretend for a living. Tom stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor with a harsh sound that echoed through the silent studio. The audience gasped, and security personnel at the edges of the set tensed, ready to move if necessary. I think we're done here, Tom said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that had commanded million-dollar film sets for decades. Oh, we're just getting started, Maher replied, his grin widening. Sit down, Tom. Let's have a real conversation for once in your life. Tom remained standing, his hands clenched at his sides as he stared down at Maher. The host's smug expression only fueled the fire building inside him. Every instinct told him to walk away, to maintain his dignity and leave this circus behind. But something in Maher's tone, something in the way he was looking at him like a specimen under a microscope, made him pause. You know what, Bill? Tom said, slowly lowering himself back into his chair. You're right. Let's have a real conversation. But let's make sure we're both playing by the same rules. Oh, this should be good, Maher said, settling back in his chair with obvious satisfaction. Please, enlighten me about these rules. Simple, Tom replied, his voice calm, but with an edge that cut through the studio air. If you want to dig into my personal life, then I get to dig into yours. If you want to talk about things that are supposed to be off limits, then nothing is off limits. Are you sure you want to play that game? For the first time since the interview began, Maher's confident expression wavered slightly. He had built his career on being the one asking the uncomfortable questions, not answering them. But backing down now, on live television, would be professional suicide. I've got nothing to hide, Maher said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. Really? Tom asked, leaning forward with predatory interest. Because I remember a certain incident in Vegas about 10 years ago. Something about a hotel room, a married politician's wife, and some very compromising photographs that mysteriously never made it to the tabloids. The color drained from Maher's face. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't, Tom said, his smile returning, but now it was sharp as a blade. Just like you don't know about the writers you've systematically bullied off this show. Just like you don't know about the young female interns who filed complaints with human resources that somehow always get buried. You're out of line, Maher said, his voice rising for the first time. This is my show, and I'm your guest, Tom shot back. A guest you invited here under false pretenses so you could ambush me for ratings. So let's give your audience what they really want to see. Let's see how you handle being in the hot seat for once. The studio audience was transfixed. This wasn't the usual celebrity puff piece they had expected. This was a gladiatorial combat between two of the most powerful men in entertainment. And neither was backing down. You think you can intimidate me? Maher asked, trying to regain his composure. You think because you're Tom Cruise, because you're some big movie star, that you can come on my show and threaten me? I'm not threatening you, Bill, Tom replied, his voice deadly calm. I'm just pointing out that glass houses and stones don't mix well. You've made a career out of tearing people down, of finding their weaknesses and exploiting them for laughs. But what happens when someone does the same thing to you? This is ridiculous, Maher said, but his hands were shaking slightly as he reached for his water glass. You're acting like a child. Am I? Tom asked. Or am I just treating you the way you treat everyone else? You want to talk about my personal life? Fine. Let's talk about yours. Let's talk about the real Bill Maher, not the character you play on television. There is no character, Maher snapped. This is who I am. Really? Tom pressed. Because the Bill Maher I've heard about from people who actually know you is a very different person. They tell me you're insecure, paranoid, and desperate for approval. They tell me you surround yourself with yes men because you can't handle anyone who challenges you. They tell me that behind all that arrogance and cynicism, you're just a scared little boy who never got over being picked on in high school. Maher's face was now bright red, his carefully constructed on-air persona crumbling before the audience's eyes. You don't know anything about me. I know enough, Tom said. I know that you're a bully who hides behind comedy and claims it's just entertainment. I know that you've destroyed careers and relationships for the sake of a punchline. I know that you're sitting there right now, on your own show, completely out of your depth because for once in your life, someone is fighting back. The tension in the studio was suffocating. Crew members stood frozen at their positions, unsure whether to keep rolling or cut to commercial. The audience sat in stunned silence, watching two titans of entertainment tear each other apart. You want to know what I think? Tom continued, his voice rising with passion. I think you're everything that's wrong with modern media. You take complex issues and reduce them to cheap jokes. You take real people with real problems and turn them into punchlines for your audience to laugh at. You've made cynicism and cruelty your brand, and you've convinced yourself that makes you some kind of truth teller. At least I don't live in a fantasy world, Maher shot back, desperation creeping into his voice. At least I don't pretend to be someone I'm not. Who am I pretending to be? Tom demanded. I'm an actor. That's my job. I play characters in movies. But when those cameras stop rolling, I'm still the same person. Can you say the same thing? Or is this cynical, bitter persona just another role you're playing because you're too afraid to show people who you really are? I'm not afraid of anything, Maher said, but his voice cracked slightly. Aren't you? Tom asked. Because from where I'm sitting, you look terrified. You look like a man who's finally met someone who won't be intimidated by your act. You look like someone who's used to being the smartest person in the room, and you've just realized that tonight, you're not. Maher's hands were visibly shaking, now as he gripped the edge of his desk. This is insane. You're completely unhinged. Am I? Tom asked, standing up again. Or am I just giving you a taste of your own medicine? How does it feel, Bill? How does it feel to be on the receiving end for once? The host looked around desperately, as if searching for an escape route. His producers were frantically signaling from the wings, but he seemed frozen in place, unable to regain control of his own show. You know what the real tragedy is? Tom continued, his voice softening slightly. You actually have talent. You're smart. You're articulate. You could use your platform to do something meaningful. But instead, you've chosen to make a living by tearing people down. You've chosen to be a destroyer instead of a builder. I don't need career advice from someone who jumps on couches, Maher managed to say, but the insult fell flat, lacking his usual venom. There it is, Tom said, shaking his head sadly. When you can't win an argument, you resort to the same tired jokes everyone else makes. You're more predictable than a romantic comedy, Bill. And that's the saddest part of all. The studio was dead silent except for the quiet hum of the cameras still rolling. Maher sat behind his desk, his face a mask of rage and humiliation, while Tom stood over him like a conquering general surveying a defeated enemy. I think we're done here, Tom said finally, straightening his jacket. Unless you have something else you'd like to discuss. But before Maher could respond, something inside him snapped, and he made a decision that would change everything. Maher's face contorted with rage as he slammed his hand down on the desk, the sound echoing through the silent studio like a gunshot. You arrogant son of a bitch, he snarled, all pretense of professional composure abandoned. You think you can come on my show and humiliate me? You think you can sit there and psychoanalyze me like some two-bit therapist? Tom's expression didn't change, but his eyes grew colder. I think I just did. Well, here's a news flash for you, Tom, Maher continued, his voice rising to a near shout. Nobody cares about your movies anymore. Nobody cares about your stunts or your perfect smile or your carefully managed image. You're a relic, a dinosaur from a different era of Hollywood that's already dead and buried. Is that really the best you can do? Tom asked, his voice eerily calm in contrast to Maher's hysteria. After everything I just said about you, your comeback is to tell me I'm old? That's it. That's your big moment. The audience was completely silent, some covering their mouths in shock at what they were witnessing. This had gone far beyond entertainment into something raw and brutal, like watching a car accident in slow motion. My big moment. Maher laughed, but it was a harsh, bitter sound. My big moment is watching you finally show everyone who you really are. The mask is off, Tom. America is seeing the real you, and it's not pretty. You want to see the real me? Tom asked, taking a step closer to the desk. The real me would have walked out of here 20 minutes ago. The real me would have let my lawyers handle this. But you know what? I'm tired of people like you thinking you can attack anyone you want without consequences. Consequences? Maher scoffed. What are you going to do, sue me? Have me blacklisted? This is America, Tom. We have something called free speech here. Free speech, Tom repeated, nodding slowly. Right. The same free speech that lets you spread lies about people, destroy reputations, and hide behind comedy when you get called out for it. The same free speech that you use as a shield whenever someone challenges your bullying. I'm not a bully, Maher protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Really? Tom asked. Then what do you call what you've been doing for the past 30 minutes? What do you call ambushing a guest with personal attacks? What do you call using your platform to try to humiliate someone who came here in good faith? Maher's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. For once in his career, he was speechless, unable to formulate a comeback or deflect with humor. You know what your problem is, Bill? Tom continued, his voice cutting through the silence. Like a blade. You've spent so long hiding behind your desk, protected by your writers and your audience and your producers, that you've forgotten what it's like to face real opposition. You've gotten comfortable being the big fish in your little pond, and now you're drowning in the deep end. This is my show, Maher said weakly, but the words sounded hollow even to him. Not anymore, Tom replied. Right now, this is my show, and I'm going to use it to show everyone exactly who Bill Maher really is. You're not a comedian, you're not a political commentator, you're not even a good interviewer. You're a parasite who feeds off other people's pain and calls it entertainment. The studio lights seemed to dim as Tom's words hung in the air. Several audience members were visibly uncomfortable, shifting in their seats and looking around nervously. This had gone beyond uncomfortable into genuinely disturbing territory. You can't talk to me like that, Maher said, his voice barely above a whisper. I just did, Tom replied. And you know what? It felt good. It felt good to finally tell someone like you exactly what everyone else is thinking, but is too polite to say. Security, Maher called out, his voice cracking. Security, get him out of here. But the security guards hesitated, looking uncertainly between the two men. This wasn't a typical disturbance. This was their boss being systematically destroyed by a guest, and they weren't sure how to handle it. You're pathetic, Tom said, shaking his head in disgust. You can't win the argument, so you're going to have me thrown out? That's your solution? That's the great Bill Maher's master plan. Get out, Maher said, pointing toward the exit with a shaking finger. Get out of my studio right now. I'm not going anywhere, Tom replied, crossing his arms. You invited me. Here, you started this fight, and now you're going to finish it. Unless you're admitting that you can't handle what you started. I said get out, Maher screamed, his face now purple with rage. The security guards finally moved, approaching Tom cautiously. But the actor held up his hand, and something in his expression made them stop. Don't, he said quietly. Don't make this worse than it already is. You're threatening my security now, Maher asked, his voice hysterical. I'm not threatening anyone, Tom replied. I'm just pointing out that you're embarrassing yourself in front of your own audience. Look around, Bill. Look at their faces. They're not laughing with you anymore. They're not even laughing at me. They're just sorry for you. Maher followed Tom's gaze to the audience, and what he saw there made his blood run cold. The faces staring back at him weren't filled with admiration or amusement. They were filled with pity, disgust, and embarrassment. His own audience was turning against him. This is over, Maher said, his voice barely audible. Cut the cameras. Cut them now. No, Tom said firmly. Keep them rolling. Let America see how this ends. Let them see what happens when a bully finally gets stood up to. I am not a bully, Maher said, but there was no fight left in him. Then prove it, Tom challenged. Apologize. Admit that you were wrong to ambush me. Admit that you crossed a line. Show everyone that you're actually the decent person you pretend to be. The studio was so quiet that the hum of the air conditioning was audible. Everyone waited, holding their breath, to see what Maher would do. "I'm sorry," Maher said finally, the words barely escaping his lips. "What was that?" Tom asked. "I don't think everyone heard you." "I said I'm sorry," Maher repeated, louder this time. "I'm sorry for ambushing you. I'm sorry for crossing the line. I'm sorry for being unprofessional." Tom studied the broken man sitting behind the desk for a long moment. "That's not enough," he said finally. "That's not nearly enough." "What do you want from me?" Maher asked, desperation clear in his voice. "I want you to understand something," Tom said, his voice soft but carrying clearly through the studio. "I want you to understand that there are real people behind the jokes you make. Real people with real feelings who are affected by what you say and do. I want you to understand that having a platform comes with responsibility, and you've been failing that responsibility for years." "I understand," Maher said, but he wouldn't meet Tom's eyes. "No, you don't," Tom replied. "But maybe. Someday you will. Maybe someday you'll realize that being clever isn't the same as being right. Maybe someday you'll realize that making people laugh at someone else's expense isn't really comedy at all." Tom straightened his jacket and looked directly into the camera. "And maybe someday, the people watching at home will realize that they deserve better than this. They deserve hosts who build people up instead of tearing them down. They deserve entertainment that doesn't come at the cost of someone else's dignity." With that, Tom turned and walked toward the exit, leaving Maher sitting alone behind his desk, completely defeated. The audience sat in stunned silence as the most powerful man in late-night television crumbled before their eyes. As Tom reached the studio door, he paused and looked back one final time. "Good luck, Bill," he said quietly. "You're going to need it." The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving behind a studio full of people who had just witnessed something unprecedented in television history. Bill Maher sat motionless behind his desk, staring at nothing, while his audience slowly began to file out, whispering among themselves about what they had just seen. The cameras kept rolling for another full minute before someone finally remembered to call cut, but by then, the damage was done. The king of late-night television had been dethroned by his own guest, and everyone in America was about to find out exactly how it happened. So what do you think? Was Tom Cruise justified in fighting back against Bill Maher's ambush, or did he go too far in his response? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories from behind the scenes of Hollywood.